Good evening, everyone, and my name is Mayor Linda Newing. Welcome to the Newcastle City Council for Tuesday, December 6th. The time is 7 p.m. And tonight we will be, just a reminder, we are taking regular public comment, and then we are also separately taking comment on the public hearing, the development agreement. And if you noticed when you came in, there are sign-up sheets in the center of the room. I now have the general public comment sheet, but if you wanted to speak, I know you could add your name and our city clerk will grab that. You're playing with my mind, aren't you? All right. It's going to be a long night with Director Bronze here.
I didn't hear anything then, anyway. I don't understand.
And with that, I'll ask everyone rise and join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. City Clerk White, will you please call the roll?
Deputy Mayor Sherlock.
Here.
Councilmember Griffin. Here. Councilmember Villasenor. Here. Councilmember Lacotia. Councilmember Charbonneau. Councilmember Clark. And Mayor Newing.
Here.
7 present, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. We do have a quorum tonight. Okay. Any objections to approving the final agenda? Seeing none, agenda is approved. Public comment, and as I mentioned, we do have the regular public comment, and that is what this is. I have 2 people signed up, and the first one is Peggy Price. Are you for the public hearing? We can add your name to it then. Thank you. Carol Simpson.
Good evening, council members. Carol Simpson with the Olympus neighborhood. Waste management customer service has declined from what was agreed to in the 2019 contract. Today I called about a missed pickup. I reached an automated phone answering system. After going through several prompts, I was placed on hold for an estimated 10 minutes, as reported by the system, with an option to leave a call back. The contract requires that no call should be placed on hold more than 2 minutes. And it's against the contract to ask customers to have a call back from Waste Management. My call took a total of 20 minutes to complete my business. When I did reach a human, he said that the driver reported that our recycle cart was not at the curb at the correct time. This is false. Our yard waste, garbage, and recycle carts were all at the curb the night before. This isn't always a go-to answer from Waste Management when customers report missed collections. Your cart was not at the curb. These are daily reports by the drivers, and this is against the rules when the contract states that the contractor shall not provide misrepresentations in its reports. The Waste Management website has changed since the initial contract implementation in 2019. There used to be an icon on the website to report missed collections. In fact, there are 2 websites. There's a Waste Management Newcastle website where we sign up for service. It displays all our rates, all the pickups, what's in yard waste, what's in recycling. But there's a separate website to sign in as a customer. This is confusing. This is not customer friendly. And when I did try and sign into my account, which I had established a couple of years ago, I couldn't sign in. So I went through the process of trying to reestablish that, anyway, it was broken. I couldn't get in there. So I contacted the online chat, and after waiting 6 minutes for them to review with tech, they came back and said, tech will have to fix that. You can sign in 48 hours. Has the city confirmed that it approved changes to Waste Management's website as the contract requires? Has the city requested website utilization reports by Waste Management per the contract? Is there an email option as required by the contract? I couldn't find this on the city website. I would gladly volunteer with any of other Newcastle residents to be a beta tester of the Waste Management website. So please direct Waste Management to retrain their drivers to provide accurate reports with no misrepresentations. Please direct Waste Management to provide a link to its login from the Waste Management Newcastle webpage where we set up our service. If Waste Management is not going to honor the contract that we negotiated with Newcastle, because they're a behemoth, multi-billion-dollar national corporation, and we're just a little city, please remember that when the city bids out a new contract in 2029. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I see no other comments signed up. Are there any members of the audience who wanted to make public comment but did not sign up? Okay, any virtual members, Director Bronze? Thank you. All right, with that, I'll close this round of public comment. We have no ceremonial presentations tonight, so we'll move on to council comment. Councilmember Charbonneau, do you want to start us off?
Thank you. Starting with number 6. I want to thank China Falls resident Ryan Tang for meeting with me for his civics project for his Bellevue College political science class. More interest in zoning than I have ever seen from a young man before, so that was very encouraging. I also would like to brag that the Hazen girls wrestling team at our first competition this past weekend took first of 19 girls teams and also third of 42 teams, including the boys, so they beat 40 boys teams this past weekend in spite of all their coaching holding them back. And I wanted to let folks know that there is currently the filing period for the King County Conservation District, which is a election not a lot of people keep their eyes on, but it has a lot to do with climate change and our environment. Filing period is online currently until December 9th, and then the election will be online for that as well, January 24th through February 14th. Otherwise, I know we got a packed schedule, so I will cut it there.
Thank you. Councilmember Clark, what do you have for us?
Thank you, Mary Nguyen. So this magazine, everybody might recognize it. It comes in the mail. This one's from October. I think it comes out monthly. Chris Brown and his family put this on. So I look through it every month, and I was a little surprised to see at the back, honestly, Verde now hiring. So we spent some time in recent council meetings talking about how these businesses were in desperate need of money, and they needed our money. So I was surprised to see that one of the businesses who was pretty vocal about needing money is hiring somebody. It doesn't sound like a business that needs our money. And I was one of the people who argued that we need to keep a hold of this money, because we're having an impending recession coming. And so I'm encouraging the city manager and the community development director to consider, and I've sent emails to them about, be very, very careful about the criteria that we use to select businesses, and we make sure that the businesses actually need the money that we send them, because this money belongs to all the people of Newcastle, right? All 13,000 people. So I'm just encouraging our two individuals here to please be diligent in their process of evaluating businesses. The next thing is tomorrow is Pearl Harbor Day, right? I hope everybody remembers the significance of that day and pays it the proper respect. And this is our last meeting until next year, so I'd like to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, and please remember the reason for the season, the birth of Christ rather than Santa Claus. Thank you.
Councilmember Lakota.
Good evening. Since this is our last meeting, I just wanted to wish everybody happy holidays. Thank you.
Councilmember Villasenor.
Good evening, everybody. I had the pleasure of attending our local tree lighting the other weekend, and I also had the solemn occasion to stand on the streets of Bellevue today to watch the procession for fallen police officer Jordan Jackson. I mention both of these events because they represent what community truly means and speaks to the simple power of gathering. Thanks to all of you attending here tonight and those online who give attention to our local issues. And this time of the year especially reminds me to think of others and to look forward to the coming new year. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Griffin?
Thank you, Mayor Dewing. Just wanted to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Deputy Mayor Sherlock?
Thank you. Yeah, I also was at the tree lighting ceremony. It was really fun, and thanks to Dave and the crew and all the volunteers that put that together. It's always a fun event, and happy holidays and happy New Year. I'm excited to see so many people in the chambers tonight too.
All right, thank you. Any regional committee reports? Oh, Councilmember Charbonneau, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On November 16th, I attended the Regional Transit Committee where we approved the 2023 to 2024 budget that operates on a biennium, so every 2 years. The real focus over the next 2 years is going to be on service recovery in regards to reaching back to pre-COVID levels of ridership, and also a very small net gain amount of transit hours, largely by bus. And that is going to look like 191,400 service hours over the next 2 years. Apologies. And that is the direction they're heading, as well as free youth transit moving forward.
All right, thank you. I actually skipped over my comments. If there are no other regional committee comments, I'll go ahead and backtrack a little bit. Apologies for that. I want to take a moment to thank our city staff for another amazing year, and my appreciation to you for all the work you do and all the professionalism you continually maintain. I know 2023 is a big year, a lot going on, so there's never a dull moment, especially in community development. We have a comp plan update that will kick into, and I hope every one of you takes an opportunity to get some rest over the holidays. I also want to thank Newcastle Police Department. They are on tap to participate in the Battle of the Badges this Friday night at the Renton Community Center. It's several King County policing agencies participating. Libraries celebrating 10 years of service, so thank you to our Newcastle Library. Librarian Vicki Heck does an amazing job, as well as her team, and the Friends of the Library are very active in this community, and I thank them for their work as well and their volunteerism. I also attended the tree lighting. We were very fortunate with the weather. It was like somebody ordered it. I'm guessing it was Santa Claus. But we did have that magic of Christmas and the season, and it was dry after an afternoon of rain. And I understand it rained several days throughout that weekend. I was actually out of the area, but I heard about some pretty bad downpours over Thanksgiving. And with that, I believe I have covered everything. So in your packet tonight, you have a report from Planning Commission Chair Charlie Gadzik. Mr. Gadzik could not be with us tonight. He had another engagement, but I know we have Director Hoffman with us. If you have any questions, I'm sure he's happy to answer them. You're off the hook. All right, and with that, I'll turn it over to City Manager Scott Pingle.
Madam Mayor, do you have any council committee reports?
No. Any finance committee? I think you were done meeting.
We did meet last week, and we did approve some contracts. For the month of December, we do have a placeholder meeting in place just in case we need to approve any contracts in December. Otherwise, we won't meet.
Thank you. I apologize for that oversight. And Salary and Benefits Committee has not met since our last meeting. Now, Mr. Pingle, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Just a couple of things. I had a couple of questions last couple of weeks just regarding our pandemic relief implementation action plan. Staff's understanding from the plan approval was that it was our job now to go and implement that. We did not anticipate bringing a program or anything back for council deliberation or approval. We just wanted to make sure that that is accurate. And as we move forward, we just want to know now if we need to be bringing something back to the council. Now, definitely we'll be reporting out to the council and make sure the council has seen the program before it goes out. But that was our understanding, and so we just wanted to check in and make sure that's correct. And if we need to be bringing something back to the council, we need to make sure we understand that.
Councilmember Clark?
So based on what you just said, you will let us review or look at whatever is going to go out before it's sent out. Is that what you just said?
Yeah, so we would plan on saying, hey, council, here's the program. We did not anticipate bringing it back to the full council for deliberation or to vet or to approve, but certainly we'll send it out to the council before it goes out to the public.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Sherlock?
Thank you. Also, the newly reinstated Economic and Community Development Committee will be meeting next week.
December 15th.
Yeah, so I don't know if that committee can help bring more information to the rest of the council as well.
We can talk about that. The only other thing is, just want to remind council, I'm looking for feedback on a retreat/workshop. I'll continue to put it in my Friday updates, but also I'll be working with City Clerk White on getting a doodle pull out to you, hopefully this week, we'll see. Just so that we can try to get a date set.
Thank you. All right. Any objections to the consent agenda? Seeing none, consent agenda is approved as presented. All right, the next item on the agenda is a public hearing on the adoption of Resolution 2022-920, the Lee Property Development Agreement. The sequence of events will be after I'm done. I will turn it over to City Attorney Chambers to give council an overview of a quasi-judicial process. We will open the public hearing, receive a staff presentation, followed by council member questions. Then the floor will be opened to the public for testimony. If there's anyone in the audience who wishes to testify during the hearing, please add your name to the sign-up list now if you haven't done so already. And we will call your name when it's your turn to speak. After testimony, there will be an opportunity for council member comments, after which we will close the public hearing and proceed to motions. Are there any questions about the order for the public hearing? Okay. The time is 7:18 and the public hearing on the development agreement for the Lee property is now open. City Attorney Chambers, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, council, committee, and members of the public. So as the mayor indicated, this will be a quasi-judicial hearing to determine whether the city would like to enter into a development agreement with the Lee family and Intracorp for development on the Lee Bima property. As it is a quasi-judicial hearing, you are not sitting in your legislative capacity, but in your quasi-judicial capacity, meaning that the only information you should take into consideration when making your decision is that which is in the record as part of the hearing. To help ensure that this is a fair process, the appearance of fairness doctrine applies, meaning not only does the hearing have to be fair, but it must appear to be fair. And to ensure that that is going to occur, I'm going to ask all of you at the same time a set of questions, and then depending on everybody's responses to those questions, we may have individual questions as those come about. So please answer either in the affirmative or the negative here. Do any of you have an interest in the property or the application? Do any of you stand to gain or lose any financial benefit as a result of the outcome of the hearing?
No.
Can you hear and consider this application in a fair and objective manner?
Yes.
Have any of you engaged in any ex parte communications with either proponents or opponents of the application that have not been submitted into the record already? So we'll just start there.
No.
No. Okay. Members of the public, would anybody like to attempt to disqualify any of the council members for violation of the appearance of fairness doctrine? There's no answers, Your Honor. Your Honor. Madam Mayor.
Old habits die hard, apparently.
Old habits, they do in fact die hard.
Is that a promotion or a demotion? All right, thank you. We will move on, and I believe we have the developer group in the audience, and also Senior Planner Fitzgibbon. So, Director Hoffman, I will let you go ahead and manage who's speaking first.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Mark Hoffman, Community Development Director. We'd like to start with a short presentation by Senior Planner Fitzgibbons, who unfortunately has to be remote tonight. So while we patch her in, and then right after that would be the applicant and their team presenting in person. Thank you.
Good evening.
Go ahead, Aaron. Go ahead, Aaron.
Good evening.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Thumbs
Yeah.
up?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to start. Okay, thank you. I can see you on YouTube. So it's a little delayed. Anyway, getting started here. I am here to present staff's review of the Lee property.
Yes, we can.
Oh dear. Back. Okay. I'm so sorry. Okay. Staff's presentation on the Lee Development Property Agreement. Tonight, I'm just going to talk briefly about what a development agreement is. Then I'm going to go over the timeline. We'll do a project overview, but it's going to be very brief because we're going to allow the applicant to give you most of the detail on that. I'll talk briefly about CAC review, and then we'll go into public comments received after the packet was published. A development agreement allows a city to take a closer look at its development standards in unique instances where development can meet a public need. DAs are regulated by the city and state code, and they must provide a public benefit. A DA may allow modifications to certain codes. In this instance, Chapter 1812 NMC Development Standards and Chapter 1824 NMC Critical Area Stream and Wetland Buffer Regulations are the two parts of the code that are being have modifications requested. The DA decision criteria that staff review and council is also subject to review is that a DA must show that it is in conformance with the comprehensive plan, is compatible with adjacent land uses and neighborhoods. It mitigates impacts to public facilities. Often these impacts are mitigated through impact fees from the development. As stated before, the project also has to provide a greater benefit to the community than a project built under standard regulations. It is staff's full response to these criterion were outlined in the agenda bill for tonight, so I won't go over all of them. So moving on to the Lee property, this is the historic Pacific Coast Company House number 75, which is also called the Bima House on the property itself. Going back in time just a little bit, The historic buildings on the Lee property are the only remaining buildings from the city's coal mining era. The Bima House is dated back to about 1880, and Mr. Bima was a coal miner, and the family rented the house until 1920 when Mr. Bima passed away. Mrs. Bima then purchased the property. Had she not, the house would have been demolished just like the other buildings in the surrounding area. The property was purchased by the Lee family, and Ms. Lee had hopes of making Bima House a public resource. It was eventually added to the list of National Historic Places as well as King County's list of historic places, if I'm correct in my understanding. In 2018, there was an MOU or Memorandum of Understanding signed with the city with instructions for development of the site. This last spring, the DA application was submitted by Intracorp along with a master plan. While the master plan that was included in the packet is not fully engineered, it does provide the vision and a very solid understanding of what the site could look like and what the development could achieve. There's a lot of study that has happened up to this point tonight. This fall, the Planned Unit Development or PUD application was submitted, and it will be finalized over the next several months if the development agreement is approved tonight or at a subsequent meeting. We would then have another public hearing with the hearing examiner who would provide a recommendation for the city council's decision on the PUD. If that is approved, we would eventually move on to engineering, infrastructure construction, and building permits and construction. You'll note on these slides, there are big reddish arrows. The orientation of the site will change from north being up to the left once we start looking at plans. So just to orient you here, north is up. The Lee property contains 6 parcels. It's a little under 7.5 acres. It's immediately adjacent to the golf course to the east. South is China Falls neighborhood. To the west is Olympic Ridge neighborhood. And then to the north is a single family home development that has a building permit issued. Up to the north is the YMCA, and then up here you have Newcastle Commons. To get a little bit oriented with the site, I just wanted to go over some of the things you might hear about. You'll hear about the significant trees on the western portion of the site. You'll hear about an extension of the sidewalk on 136. The sidewalk currently ends right in this location here. The Bima House currently sits about the center portion of the site and is proposed to be moved to the north. And then here is the Knott Garden, which you may have heard about or might hear about tonight. For the most part, like I said before, I will let the applicant provide the details on the project, but I wanted to go over some key points. And you'll notice here, north then is to the left. The project includes 37 single-family homes clustered to the east and south. Each is loaded off of an interior road here. They all have driveways and adequate parking. The clustering provides space for the wetlands, which are to the west and the south, as well as the proposed Heritage Park. The project would provide 4 parking spaces here for the park itself. And to the north, there would be an additional 15 public street parking stalls. Let's see here, next slide. Get to move. There we go. In terms of pedestrian connections, the project would punch through, for lack of a better word, 138th Avenue Southeast from China Falls to the north, and it would provide pedestrian connections along 138 and Southeast 71st. It would also connect the Thomas Rouse Trail along 136th Avenue and connect this sidewalk all the way up to Newcastle Golf Club Road. And that equals over 4,600 linear feet of pedestrian connectivity. The proposed modifications, as stated in the agenda bill, the first one was the stormwater dispersion trench. Stormwater dispersion trenches help reduce erosion from flowing water by kind of fanning the water out. And they make the flow at or near pre-developed conditions. The code per code, a trench may be located in the outer portion of a type 3 or 4 wetland. However, this wetland is a type 2, which means the rating is slightly higher for the wetland due to something within its ecology. The project has to show per code that the modification to the buffer that is proposed would provide a better outcome for the critical areas. Because the outfall would be located where a house currently exists, here you can see this relocated by my house, and here's the dispersion trench. This is currently considered a non-functioning buffer area. So there will be no disturbance to the wetland by the trench's placement. This area is also, according to the wetland memo, the location of the trench is crucial to maintaining the hydrology of the wetlands and the stream on the property. In terms of building height, the 16 units, which are requested to have an additional 2 feet of height, which again the applicant will go over, are unable to meet both the requirements for superior design, as stated in the MOU, as well as building code with its new energy requirements and zoning code. So because of the way the building height is averaged on grade at the midpoint of the roof, which you can see would be here in this pink bar, on these 16 homes, because of the topography and the way we measure height, the applicant has requested an additional 2 feet of height so that they can meet the architecturally contextually sensitive requirement of the MOU. Otherwise, you may end up with a squishier roof as shown here. In terms of the housing count, the density request is not necessarily above what a typical code project could achieve. Looking here on the screen, 37 units in perspective, the gross acreage of the site is 7.5 acres. The effective area, which is without the critical areas, is 6.52 acres. So you multiply that times 4, and that gets your base density because it's 4 acres, 4 units per acre in this area, excuse me. So, but the code also allows a maximum density, which would allow 6 units per acre in an R4, or 39 units. Now, a project with 39 units wouldn't likely include all the amenities that this project includes. With the wetlands and the park, it'd be hard to squish in 39 units. However, the applicant has calculated that they could definitely meet 33 homes with the density incentives and the PUD, and they're requesting an additional 4 homes or 37 homes. What staff noticed about this is that it does seem to satisfy the requirement for the project to be compatible with adjacent land uses because it's a single family home community with fewer units than the maximum allowed per code. In the capital improvement plan, the project does meet some of those goals, and it does meet several comprehensive plan goals, which was outlined in the packet. I won't reiterate those, but I did want to touch on a few points from the capital improvement plan. T049 widens 136th Avenue from Southeast 79th to Newcastle Golf Club Road. That's this dashed blue line here. While this project does not widen 136th Avenue, it does provide a sidewalk connection, which T049 would provide as well. T16 is the extension of the Thomas Rouse Trail northward from Southeast 75th Street to the city boundary. Again, this project provides connection for that Thomas Rouse Trail. And thirdly, there's an unnamed project to acquire a historic park or open space, and the Bima house is actually specifically mentioned as an example of what that could be in the capital improvement plan. The CAC recommendation, staff would plan on returning to CAC. They have seen the project twice now. There was some concern about parking, but staff did point out that there are those additional parking spaces at the east end on 138th that would provide some opportunity for overflow in addition to those 4 dedicated parking spaces. This park is only about 1 acre in size, and it doesn't really have an active portion such as the Heemster site. So staff's recommendation was to have those 4 dedicated spots, and the developer suggested the additional 15. Those additional 15 are less than 300 feet from the site, the historic park. In terms of comments, the city did include any comments received up to the packet date, but we have received additional comments, 5 in favor of the project and 3 opposed, that were not included in the packet. Those are listed here. There are a couple items from those that I would like to provide some clarification on. One is that mine shafts are considered regulated critical areas in the state of Washington, and there are requirements for mitigating them. So rest assured that staff is looking at those requirements specifically for those coal mine hazards. Also, there are no flood hazards in this area of Newcastle. Most of Newcastle does not have flood areas, and there are 2 small locations, one of which is on public property. And so we are up to date on our FEMA flood areas, and that should not be a concern on this site. So providing staff's recommendation, staff recommend the approving the resolution pursuant to chapter 1709 and the requirements contained within. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand it back over. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Do we want to bring up the next group? Okay, all right, go ahead.
Please do. The applicant has a team presentation. I'm not sure of the order, but I believe Dave McDuff is the initial presenter.
There, am I? Thank you, I'm sorry. Good evening, council members, staff, and members of the public. My name is Dave McDuff, and I'm the project manager for Intracorp on the Lee property. Been working on it for about 2 years now. We appreciate the opportunity this evening to discuss the proposed development agreement, the proposed development agreement and how it memorializes the commitments of the Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, executed by the city and the Lee family to create a public heritage park anchored by the historic Bynum House and much more. The master plan, which you've heard referred to, which is included in the development agreement, incorporates all the design elements contemplated in the MOU for the creation of the heritage park, which pays homage to the city's history, as well as creation of a complementary residential community. Our team has worked closely with staff, property owners, key stakeholders over really the past 18 months to understand their vision for this unique property, much of what is informed by the MOU. We're here this evening in our presentation to really discuss 5 things. First, we'll summarize the development agreement structure. Second, we'll review the master plan in quite some detail for the Lee property, including the public heritage park, the anchor of the master plan, active recreation spaces, housing areas, and critical areas and buffers. Third, we'll review the superior home design required by the MOU. Fourth, we'll review the public benefits, which staff briefly summarized, provided through the development agreement. And then we will also discuss the 3 requests for code flexibility, also discussed briefly by staff. Next slide, please. I think everybody's quite familiar with the location of the property. The site is really surrounded amazingly by substantially undeveloped land, in the sense that you've got the Newcastle Golf Club to the east and to the north of the site. To the west of the site is actually a native growth protection area below Olympic Ridge. The property sits quite a bit below that. And to the south, we've got the China Falls neighborhood, which actually only has, I think, 2 homes that actually abut the common edge of the property itself. Next slide, please. The development agreement structure, I think, is quite unique compared to development agreements that the city has dealt with in the past. the structure of this development agreement is really substantially simpler by design. This development agreement stems from the memorandum of understanding that we've talked about earlier this evening and in prior meetings. And that MOU really set in place a public-private partnership to allow for preservation of the historic Beima House and 3 related buildings, and through creation of a heritage park funded by the developer on the Lee property. The MOU anticipated approving a development agreement to memorialize the commitments made in the MOU, hence our attendance this evening. A key component of that MOU is the requirement in the development agreement to have a master plan for the entire property that demonstrates how the requirements for the heritage park and other areas of the property are addressed and will be developed. That plan is prominent in the development agreement, and it's the exhibits before you. Intercorp and staff agreed that the city's PUD process is the optimal vehicle for future approvals that will be required for this project because of the flexibility it provides to account for the many unique opportunities to be addressed in a project such as this. The point being that the project will be designed and constructed almost exclusively within the framework of the city's adopted standards and codes. Next slide. Aaron and staff covered the timeline, but this is something we shared in the past. To us, really one of the key parts of this exhibit, without kind of repeating what Aaron had shared, this is consistent, is the fact that there is opportunity for future public input in multiple steps along the way as actual future entitlements, the PUD go through a process, the ERP is worked out, etc. So we're really kind of at a starting point of which there's quite a bit of public process still available for us. And we have always had an open door for the public, anybody to contact us and to share their thoughts. That door remains wide open. Thank you. I guess my final comment here is also, at this point, I'd like to introduce my co-presenters, Megan McKay, who is a principal with Johnson Architects and really the principal of the master plan before us, and Tabor Caden, a principal with Weissman Design Group, whose expertise in really the horizontal plane, the landscaping, and what this project can feel like at a ground level has been so instrumental. Thank you.
The MOU and DA are important to the community. As Aaron outlined, the town of Newcastle was founded to support coal mining in the 1860s. The original town was located on the current Lee property, so this site is a significant part of Newcastle's history. The only remaining structures from this historic town are the Beima House and its outbuildings, which still exist on the property today. Next slide, please. We took significant design inspiration from the Coals of Newcastle book by the Newcastle Historical Society, which documents the history of the area. So we just want to thank the members of the community that contributed to that project. I'd like to begin with a broad overview summary of some of the project elements we'll be speaking to tonight. We'll delve into details of each next. The project will improve pedestrian mobility through and around the site, including from China Falls and Olympic Ridge to Newcastle Golf Club Road. This is something we've added after hearing neighbor feedback from our outreach. Second, a new public heritage park will be created for the Beima House to preserve the mining town history. Third, a site master plan has been documented exceeding the MOU requirements. And lastly, we'll show the design for the new homes proposed, creating a respectful context for the Beima House. We heard the need to enhance pedestrian connectivity in this area, and this slide clearly shows the current problem. This map shows a large gap in the pink lines, which are the existing trails. Our project proposal contributes the trails in blue, filling in a missing link. Zooming in and rotating north to the left, you can see the added trails and sidewalks in greater detail. As with Aaron's presentation, from this point on, north is going to be rotated for the best fit on the screen. The development adds over 4,600 feet of trails and sidewalks, a little under 2,000 feet on the site, a little over 2,600 off the site. Most notably, again, on 136 North Newcastle Golf Club Road. This northern section of pedestrian walkway is voluntary and above and beyond the MOU commitments. Zooming in further to the site level, this is the key component of the MOU, the Site Development Master Plan. We show 4 interrelated zones on this plan. Zone 1 in pink, the public heritage park for the Bima House. Zone 2 in blue, a spine of active open space running diagonally through the site. Zone 3 in orange, 37 new single-family detached homes sized for families. And Zone 4 in yellow, the restored wetland and stream buffers. The development is clustered intentionally away towards the east from these critical areas. So now I'd like to turn it over to Tabor from Wiseman Design Group to talk about the superior site design elements.
Thank you. If we could go to the next slide, please. So we're currently looking at the overall master plan, and before I get a little bit, go a little bit too much further into the enlargements, I'd like to stop for a moment and focus on those areas that we're not going to see in the enlargements. So again, as mentioned before, the extension of the Thomas Rouse Trail along 136, that will include the use of boardwalks, which will help limit the impact on the existing trees that are really important along that roadway. There's some very large existing trees that we want to help preserve and keep the character of that road intact. Our publicly accessible trail system that connects the Thomas Rouse Trail to the park and moves its way south through the development and connects to the China Falls neighborhood. This creates better connectivity within the development, but also to the larger community. We have robust landscape buffers along 71st and 138th, and those will include large evergreen, shade, and flowering trees, as well as shrubs and ground cover. We are meeting our tree replacement requirement without utilizing any fee in lieu, so all the trees that we need to take down on the site to build the development will be replaced on the site. As well as we are very careful about our plant material selection. Those plants are going to be selected for drought tolerance, habitat creation, and long-term survivability. Next slide, please. So you'll see the 3 large squares on the screen. Those are the enlargements that we're going to go into in a moment, but I also want those being the public park, the activity lawn, and the development park area. But I want to draw your attention to some of the imagery around the exterior. That those images really represent the character of the development that we're trying to achieve, and that's reflective of the mining history reinterpreted for a modern community. Next slide. So here we are at the Bima House, and what's labeled here really reflects what is required in the MOU. This plan reflects a visual concept of how the MOU would be executed, including parking, signage, landscape elements, and fencing. The Bima House itself and its associated outbuildings relocated in their current configuration on site. And again, the imagery to the right on the screen really represents the character, materiality, and design intent of what the park could be. Ultimately, the park will have other elements such as seating, artifacts, and things that are not currently required by the MOU. Next slide. This area is what we're calling the activity lawn, and it's the connection between the park and the activity lawn will be along a winding path, offering views down into the wetland buffer. And this is a large grass area that's located on top of our stormwater detention facility, and it offers an area that's much needed for active recreation. It's a large lawn area. There's a small perimeter path and some seating areas that are nestled into the hillside, and these offer a great opportunity for multi-generational play. Based on staff recommendations, this area also acts as a large green buffer between the public park and the development, both horizontally and vertically, as there is a large grade change between the park and the houses itself. Next slide, please. So this plan has a lot of detail, and we're going to be hitting just sort of the principal elements. That being the multi-use public trail system that continues south through the primary open space of the development, along which many activities are located. So first, to the northern part of the slide, you'll see a nature play area with seating and different types of nature play elements, allowing kids and parents to gather and play together. And you'll see some examples of those on the right-hand side. So we're not looking at a sort of more traditional play structure. This is very in keeping with the rural character of the site. The second area, which is all the way at the southern end of the trail, is a modern interpretation of the Lee family knot garden. So this would include raised beds, seating areas, and a large event lawn for the community to gather. And again, you'll see some of those images there. Again, many of these elements are not required, but is something we're choosing to do to bring that superior level of design to the project. So through repetition of design elements, materiality, signage, and trail markers, we're providing a continuity between these separate park elements, weaving together a diverse collection of passive and active recreational spaces and historical learning opportunities. And with that, I'll send it back to you.
Okay, you can go to the next slide. To create a respectful and sensitive context for the Bima House as required by the MOU, we look to the architecture of the historic mining town. The single most obvious theme of the historic images are the steeply pitched gable roofs. The form of the homes and structures were also quite simple. Other than a few side dormers or a covered porch, most of the homes were a single mass or a pure form. Next slide. Another theme that struck us was regarding the windows. Both their geometry, each window is taller than it is wide, and their regular rhythm of only a couple standard window sizes. Because modern day homes are larger in scale than historic homes, we are proposing very large scale windows on our homes to create well-proportioned facades reminiscent of a similar proportion of window to wall. And there was a wide variety of wood siding materials used in the historic town: board and batten, shingles, and lap siding. We are likewise proposing several different siding types inspired by the texture and variety of the historic town. This page also has some really inspirational details, particularly the top left image of the barn with a horizontal trim element and slightly offset battens on the board and batten siding above and below that trim. Or the bottom left, a simple thin profiled angled awning above the porch. There are 3 primary home plans proposed, arranged on the site by topography or a relationship to the streets. The street-facing type, which is shown in the blue area, fronts the external streets and has a sidewalk-facing entry with a garage tucked in back. The uphill type, shown in pink, is at the center of the site where the grade is flat. The downhill type in orange is perched above the wetland where grade drops off. While there are 3 main home plans shown here in this presentation, there are 9 variations in total with an aim to provide aesthetic variety. Looking closer at the street-facing type, again, these homes have the garages tucked behind for a pedestrian-oriented front porch facing 138th. The primary form is a steeply pitched gable with side dormers. This home features board and batten siding with horizontal accent trim at the floor lines and a differential pattern of the battens at different floors, as well as a regular pattern of large-scale double sash windows. At the center of the site is the uphill type. This home also has a gable roof with a large-scale dormer, textured shingle siding, and thin angled awning above the entry, reminiscent of the porch awning detail seen in the historic photos, but updated in crisp metal detailing. The downhill unit navigates a 1-story grade change from front to back. Similar to the other homes shown, it has a simple gable form with large-scale side dormer, textured lap and shingle siding, and regular large double sash windows. As Dave outlined in his intro, the site is using the PUD process, so the development proposal largely meets existing city regulations and codes. We are requesting 3 areas of flexibility through the development agreement tonight to deliver the superior design elements seen throughout this presentation. These 3 elements are additional density, additional roof height on about half of the homes, and the stormwater outfall located in a critical area buffer. Delving in further to the additional density request, Aaron sort of covered this pretty well, but we're proposing 37 single-family detached homes, which is 4 more than is available to us through the PUD process, but less than the maximum development yield. The reasoning is to offset increased costs for the trails and sidewalks, public park, superior landscape design, superior home design, and the critical area restoration. Our next request is for height. To furnish the iconic, steeply pitched gable roof form inspired by the historic imagery of the town, the left-hand images, we need 2 feet of additional height on 16 of the 37 homes in the central area of the site where the grade is flat. Without the extra height, the homes would look like the image on the right, with a much lower roof slope, which is a more contemporary aesthetic that really misses the mark in our minds of the MOU intent for the historic referencing home design. I should also note we're not gaining any area by going taller. Sometimes that's a trick. So how does this affect the adjoining neighborhoods? We would say not at all. The site plan at the upper right shows the 16 homes this request applies to. They're shaded. These homes are not adjacent to any neighbors, but for 1 home in the southeast or upper right-hand corner. The upper left-hand aerial image shows the site surrounded by green buffering trees lying between neighboring homes and this development site. Along the bottom of this page is a section showing that our site sits in a topographic bowl. Our homes will sit well below the neighbors. So the neighboring homes are situated both above our project and buffered by mature trees. Next slide. Speaking to the 1 home near the southeast corner that abuts a cul-de-sac of China Falls, the topography, as you can see from the section at the bottom, also rises up more gradually from the development site in this direction. And the key is the street view photo. There's an existing mature evergreen tree area between the garage side of the abutting neighbor and where the nearest home on our development site will be placed. These trees will remain in place as part of a 20-foot wide landscape buffer at the side yard and a 15-foot landscape buffer at the front yard of our development proposal, which should obscure view from the off-site homes significantly. In short, the 2 extra feet of height should be imperceptible to site neighbors. Lastly, the stormwater outfall for the project is proposed in the critical area buffer, but as Aaron sort of outlined nicely, entirely within the footprint of an existing home slated to be removed, which is an existing disturbed area of the buffer. This is best shown in that left-hand image with a blue linear dispersion trench inside entirely the existing home footprint. This proposed gravel dispersion trench will replicate existing hydrology, delivering water to the wetland area. There will also be an overall improvement of the buffer area through our planned restoration efforts, and this trench will be nearly invisible. It's on the ground plane rock trench surrounded by restored landscaping, so it shouldn't have any visual effects. I've shown a lot of 2D plan views and inspiration images so far. So we wanted to show an artistic rendering of a few views into and around the proposed development to show how all of the superior design elements are intended to come together cohesively. So this is a view along 138th into the Development Park Trail and Northern Development Entrance Street. Next. And a look at the new Heritage Park with preserved Bima House. And the southern development entrance along 138th, sort of near the China Falls. Next. And a view of the interior street at the center of the site. So for public benefit, including added trails and sidewalk, a new heritage park, superior landscape and site design, and superior home design with historic referencing heritage character, we are requesting 4 additional homes, 2 feet of additional height to provide the pitched gable roof design, and stormwater outfall in an existing disturbed buffer area. So in conclusion, we hope that you have seen that the significant public benefits of this proposed project merit the asks and council approval of this development agreement. So thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, we are now on to questions. Are there any questions for either Senior Planner Fitzgibbons, Director Hoffman, or our applicant? Councilmember Clark?
Thank you, Mayor Nguyen. Not sure who to direct this question to, so when this project was considered, was there any consideration for the impact on service to road, the 136th Avenue down to Golf Course Road? What was your evaluation of the impact on the service on that road? Thank you. Anybody, I don't know who would.
I'll start as the newest person here. It's the easiest for me to start. The MOU was agreed upon in 2018. This development agreement in 2022 has a 10-year vesting period. The master planner PUD application is under review with associated traffic studies, reports, analysis. It's under review, but it's not an aspect of what's before the council tonight. It's an aspect of the project, and it is being reviewed, but under a separate application with staff right now.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councilmember Charbonneau?
Thank you. Yeah, additionally, not sure exactly where to direct it. I appreciate, my biggest concern was about pedestrian, both safety and access. I appreciate the that being talked about and addressed. I guess I'm sort of curious as well, could anyone speak to the crosswalks as well? I think there was a sort of diagram that showed different places which could have a curb as well as other items. Can anyone speak to crosswalks as well as sort of, I'm interested in the bikeability of the area, so both the roads leading up to and those neighborhoods. I think it's very hard to access that particular area of Newcastle if you're not a motorist, which is why I raised the concern about, pedestrian safety as well as trying to at least allow for alternatives if there could be possibly bike lanes and possibly barriers there.
Director Hoffman, wouldn't that be addressed further down the road?
It would be. It was mentioned tonight as part of the project design, the boardwalk along 138th and the route for the development agreement. That starts that process. There was also mention of the CIP projects that are incorporated in the comprehensive plan in accordance with adopted city standards. This would implement a project portion of improvements associated directly with the project and one additional length of sidewalk down to Newcastle Golf Road. The project's proportion or obligation under city code, half street, sidewalk, and so forth will meet city standards. The development agreement will then be followed up by the master plan, which will be consistent with this design. And then development applications come in, building permits, grading permit, engineering, civil. Forgive me if I'm butchering the names. Every city has a different name for them. But at that level, they will all meet city standards. From what I see in this design in the development agreement that's a little bit beyond city standards is the boardwalk down 138th, which will be reviewed for ADA and safety compliance and connectivity. There might be a small opportunity to follow up on that question with the Public Works Director as to what those standards are, but for the development agreement, it's premature. You do see in the 4 standards approval for criteria of this development agreement, consistency with the comprehensive plan, assume consistency with the development regulations. So as you take this proposal from where we're at with the development agreement all the way through potential construction, that issue will be addressed in conformance with the policies and the comprehensive plan for connectivity, mobility, safety, trails, and so forth. The technical aspects it's just too soon in the process. But the comments are valid and can be collected, memorized, and known when we get to that point. So the comment is very valid.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Dave McDuff again. I have history on this issue, obviously dating back prior to the new planning director. When we presented to council back in March, and after we did neighborhood meetings, and based on comment letters we heard, and Councilman Clark in particular, we heard of the importance of trying to cure an existing deficiency in safe pedestrian modality between the Olympic View neighborhood and China Falls down to that half mile or so down to Newcastle Golf Club Road. We took that seriously. That's why we stepped up and voluntarily chose to offer to build that up front as part of our project. Even though there's a CIP project to do further improvements later, we felt it was a really valid concern by existing neighbors, and so it's going to help existing neighbors, and it will benefit our neighbors to improve that modality down. So that was hopefully an example of us listening and taking seriously some of the feedback we requested and we received. We met with Newcastle Trails. We met with the golf club owners to look at how that alignment might work in correlation to hopefully future trails that Newcastle Trails would like to work out as well. We worked with the Public Works as well to look at the 5-foot concept we put in the development agreement. We ran by Public Works, we ran by planning to say, is this really feasible? The answer is yes, and we stepped up and committed to it. That's a little more history than you want, but I think it's important to show we have tried to listen and we are trying to do more than the right thing here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Griffin?
Thank you, Mayor Dewing. Since 6 of us were not serving whenever the MOU was signed, we don't have any assurance that there's no tunnels underneath the property that is being built over there. We don't know what the research was to find out, was this property able to sustain buildings without falling in and being a legal liability to the city. So I think before we get any further, we'd like to know what kind of effort was put forth in order to assure us that we're doing the right thing.
I think Senior Planner Fitzgibbons already touched on that. Director Hoffman, I apologize. Go ahead, please.
You're correct, Mayor. I will also add that what hasn't been discussed yet tonight is that the restoration of the site under the Department of Ecology is a quite extensive process and plan. Takes into account prior activities, coal mining, potential caves, issues like that as part of the requirement under voluntary cleanup of the site. That issue is addressed in that study and reports. A geotech report will also be required for the project that would identify those types of things that you mentioned. And it's, though, in my opinion, as from what I've seen over the last few weeks, it's not a big mystery as to what's there or not. There are exhibits showing locations of the coal waste, the prior coal activity. I saw them as part of the ecology report. And so that even though it's 100 and something years ago, and the fear is that something may be missed or not known because of that timeline, the extensive study of the site has taken them into account and documented them.
The question was asked, are there any tunnels underneath that? And we were assured, no, there's not. And we don't know what kind of effort was put forth because we weren't there when a lot of the effort was done and the MOU was signed. So I think that, it'd be nice if we understood that.
Go ahead.
Councilman Griffin, it's a great question. It's a very valid question. And the development agreement does not remove the opportunity for staff and the city to do the SEPA analysis for future development applications. Even the PUD, for example, has a SEPA process it will go through, of which coal mines, for example, and risks and hazards are one of the things that we've had to do extensive study on and provide the information you're asking for. That information actually is included in our PUD application with the geotech reports and a specific mine hazard report. It's just that that report is attached to a PUD application we're not discussing tonight. It has been looked at. We are exceedingly comfortable with the conclusions of that report, given where actual subsurface mining occurred relative to the park, housing, everything else, that these plans are very, very buildable safely. But that will be proven through the PUD process and associated SEPA process with review of that application. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councilmember Lakota?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I see two corners in the plan here, 138th Avenue Southeast and Southeast 71st Street. There is a corner there, and then 136th Avenue, and then Southeast 71st Street. So with the increased traffic, I know the 136th Avenue Southeast, that corner is quite blind, when you take a turn around there. So with the increased traffic, do you think that would cause some safety issues and would require a roundabout or something on both those corners?
Again, this is a development agreement, and those matters are addressed further into the process. So that is something that is not applicable to the development agreement tonight that we're reviewing.
Okay.
Any further questions? All right, seeing none, we will move on, and I believe we have extensive list of public comment, public testimony. Reminder that you do have 3 minutes. There's a clock up on the podium, and when that buzzer goes off, I will ask you to wrap up quickly and move on to the next speaker. I do know we also have Peggy Price, so I don't forget her. She's on a different list. I'm going to go ahead and call up Peggy Price first. Peggy?
I'm Peggy Price. I was sort of thinking somebody might say some of these anyway, but the History Museum, we've got an extensive collection of historic artifacts. Some of them are on people's properties, some of them are at the Public Works building in a closet, and they really should be visible to the public. They're amazing, and they should be preserved. My house couldn't hold all of them, but it would certainly be good for rotating them through and maybe even having kids come and see them, school kids come and see them, see what we used to use. The trail system, Thomas Ross Trail, don't have that. There's a little boot of property right at the head of Newcastle Commons Drive. You go across Newcastle Golf Club Road from Commons Drive. There's a little trail there to the golf course trail. And if we could go straight up from that to 136th, we would be cutting off like 500 feet in order to get to the property. And it would be a really nice little trail. Wouldn't bother the golf club at all, but it is on their property. So maybe a little easement or something like that would be really nice. We want to make sure that the public can get from point A to point B. Okay, let's see. Oh yeah, the Thomas Ross Trail, I just wanted to emphasize that the Thomas Ross Historic Road went all the way to May Valley Road. It followed what is now 136th and then 144th, and part of it is on the Highlands Trail, and then part of it is on essentially a public driveway that goes to May Valley Road. So it'd be kind of nice if all that could be tied in. And that's pretty much what I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Steve Williams.
Good evening, and thank you for all the work you do for the city of Newcastle. My name is Steve Williams. My wife and I are residents of Bellevue, but we are also members of the Newcastle Historical Society, and we were part of the team that rewrote the book, Coals of Newcastle, 100 Years of Hidden History. And on the back cover, what do we have? The Bima House. You have a gem here of a 147-year-old well-preserved house that's iconic to the coal mining communities and to state history. So we fully support the development proposal because it ensures preservation of that 1875 Bima House and the creation of a heritage park, which would be valued and visited by people from all over the region. The Newcastle Cemetery and the book have already attracted visitors from Spokane, Olympia, Bellingham, and Vancouver, as well as readers internationally. A future historic park would be a real asset to the Newcastle community and a focal point for student classes meeting their Washington State history requirements. Because of the coal mines, we had the first locomotive in Seattle, the first railroad in Seattle. We were supplying coal to the whole west coast of the United States and specifically San Francisco. The house itself is already honored and listed as a King County Historic Landmark. The little 1860s town of Newcastle was the first major settlement east of Lake Washington, and the coal mines here were King County's first major industry. In fact, in 1880, the citizens of Seattle proudly brought out President Rutherford B. Hayes to show him their most productive business, the Newcastle coal mines. In 1880, there were 140 houses here and a population of 750 people. My wife and I are both volunteer researchers and educators for the Eastside Heritage Center in Bellevue, and we have seen how tourists from all over the nation have enjoyed visiting the 1888 Fraser Cabin at Kelsey Creek Park and the 1929 Spanish Winters House in the Mercer Slough Park. Those buildings are now elements of local pride and icons of Bellevue history. They're featured in hotel guidebooks, student workbooks, and annual festivals. And that translates into tourist income for local restaurants, gas stations, coffee shops, hotels, and other businesses. So the Bellevue experience shows that a small investment now in Newcastle could enhance the city's reputation and reap citywide benefits for years and years to come. The property owner and the project developer here have gone out of their way to donate acreage and preserve buildings. They are continuing to work with the city, staff, and the Newcastle Historical Society to achieve a successful outcome, and so we recommend approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Intelkoffer.
Good evening. I'm Mike Intelkoffer, and I'm the collections manager for the Newcastle Historical Society. Our society has as its mission to celebrate and preserve the history of Newcastle and its people, and to assure that this legacy is passed on to future generations. To accomplish this, we use many tools and techniques. For example, we exhibit at events such as Newcastle Days and the Art Walk, and we give tours of the mining areas around Redtown and the Cinder Mine trailheads. We also published a book that Steve showed. We give lectures at the library, and we host visitors to the Newcastle Cemetery, and I recognize many faces here from the cemetery visits. And we work with the city to post interpretive historical signs, such as the two that are right outside City Hall in front. And Ray Lewis was instrumental in working from our group with the city to establish those signs. The city benefits from all of this because an understanding and appreciation of our heritage is essential to maintaining a unique and meaningful identity as a community. It's a quality of life issue. Newcastle has a history, it's an interesting history, and the more that residents know that history and appreciate it, the more it makes Newcastle a better place to live, work, and play. It also makes it a more appealing place to visit. So our society has a big job ahead of it to inform all of the citizens here of our history. It's a hard job, and we learn that every time we exhibit at Newcastle Days, because we hear things like, I didn't know Newcastle was a coal mining town, or I didn't know a railroad ran next to Lake Bourne, or I didn't know that a president of the United States visited Newcastle, as Steve mentioned. All true. So clearly, in order to accomplish our mission of informing the citizens of Newcastle of their fascinating history, we need more powerful tools. So why am I talking to you tonight? Because we have in front of us an opportunity to get a really powerful tool for informing the citizens of Newcastle and improving the city. That tool, of course, is the Bima House, an authentic mining house, and its adjacent outbuildings, moving them to a heritage park and putting them on display. The outbuildings, by the way, were for storing fuel, farm and garden implements, and relatives of the Bimas. So there's a story there, but that's why we're doing this, is because there's a story there, right? And our society actually has a coal mine car, a coal car, used in the Newcastle mines. We have the authentic coal-fired cast iron cook stove that was in the Bima cabin at one time. And we have a wine barrel actually used by the miners to store their homemade wine. And so we can furnish the property, and it can be a productive method of teaching history. Please. Okay. So thank you very much for your time. This is a unique, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I urge the City Council to seize it. Thank you.
Thank you. I can't clearly read the first name, but is it Kai or Kay Dalton? Thank you.
Remarks. One moment. Read off. I'm Kai Dalton. I'm the newest board member of the Newcastle Historical Society. I was elected in December of 2021. While I've only just joined the society, I am a lifetime resident of Newcastle for 17 years now. I hope to offer a somewhat unique perspective because of my age and position on the Historical Society. Shortly after I was elected to the board of the Historical Society, I heard about the proposed development. Initially, I was not very happy with the news at all. I care a lot about the environment, and I even plan to study forestry in college. But after having discussion not only with other members of the society, but with the developer as well, I was very confident that they were able to faithfully execute not only what was discussed in the MOU, but what had been discussed with the Lees and us as the Historical Society. And simply put, without any extra money from a third party like the developer, these buildings, including the Bima House itself, are going to be relegated to a fate of either rot, like a lot of other buildings around King County and even other counties in the state of Washington, or demolition. And then who knows what they'll be replaced with, and probably not something that's very, faithful to what Newcastle originally was and where we came from. We shouldn't leave those buildings to that fate. We shouldn't leave the Bima House to that fate. We shouldn't, betray our history. The company house itself is from the either late 1870s or from around about 1880. And that makes it not just one of the oldest buildings in the east side, but in all of King County. The oldest being the Doc Manor House in Seattle from the 1860s. There are very few remaining original standing buildings related to important small communities such as Newcastle, and this is one of them. As a community, we have an opportunity to not only respect our past, but to raise awareness for it, making it an experience and place all Newcastle residents, as well as others from all over our state and our country, can enjoy. Historical museums, like the ones seen in King and Pierce County, have become integral parts of their community, giving residents valuable and enjoyable experiences and connections to their culture, the heritage, and the arts, and connecting regional infrastructure like trails and bringing much needed revenue into their towns. This is not just an opportunity for our community to add something new and exciting and to preserve history. This is an opportunity for us to do the right thing.
Thank you. Ray Lewis.
Good evening. My name is Ray Lewis, a 47-year resident of what is now City of Newcastle. I joined the Historical Society when I retired 20 years ago and first worked with former Mayor Rich Crispo on preservation of our Pioneer Cemetery. Our family knew little about the Pioneer Cemetery, but would wander through it as we made our way from our home down to Lake Boren. We saw the vandalism from the 1970s in the cemetery, but we did not know about the coal mining history and the generations of people who lived here. My wife Diane this summer retired from 20 years in the Communities Activities Commission. She joined the Newcastle Park Commission first as a member and then many years as the chair. For your information, the title and scope of the Parks Commission was expanded when the organization was changed to the Community Activities Commission. My wife and I were involved with the Historical Society in the writing and updating of the Coals of Newcastle. There's Mike has the book. We've sold about 650 copies of that. It's got 172 pages, 26 pictures, and we own all the pictures now. This is true hidden history that contributed to the early success and establishment of Newcastle and Seattle. This sped up efficient railroad transportation of the coal commodity from Newcastle to the Seattle docks and to ships for San Francisco and other destinations like Australia. Preservation of the Bima House and the surrounding area will fill in the basic gaps of lost information for generations to come. It will be an important step in explaining, along with the book, the importance of the original towns of Newcastle and Coal Creek. The Bima House and the cemetery are the last remaining assets of those years. I also agree with my colleagues about the developer Intercorp. My wife and I support this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Carol Simpson.
Good evening, Carol Simpson, Olympus Neighborhood. Yes, I want you to approve this project, but I want you to defer final action until you get more information. Not everything in the Memorandum of Understanding is completed, and we don't have enough information. You know the old expression, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. Well, you have a fiduciary responsibility to look at this gift horse in the mouth. That buildings have not been assessed since 2018. They were all built before building codes ever came into existence, but the city is taking them on. When I was on council and we were entering into this Memorandum of Understanding, it was a very high-level overview. They didn't get into the nitty-gritty. We just understood there will be certain conditions that we are willing to accept and enter into a project like this. But we need more information. So you need to know the buildings. What is their condition? Have they gone downhill since they've been left since 2018? If the city takes them on and they're used for public use, since the city is a public agency owning them, will they need public improvements so they can be occupied by the public or used maybe even as a museum? What does that entail? How much will that cost? Are you willing to use the full $300,000 in park impact fees to take care of those buildings? And a restroom. Do you know how much it costs to maintain the restroom at Lake Boren Park? Secondly, the Landmark Commission met and discussed this project. Oh, good, that's good information. I immediately went online this afternoon, looked up the King County Landmarks Commission. They had a meeting on May 26th. That was 6 months ago. The meeting minutes were not available. You need to know what they talked about. You need to know what they talked about. I support all the history of this city. You need to immediately start negotiations with the Newcastle Historical Society in deeding this Newcastle Historic Park over to the Newcastle Historical Society so it won't be a liability to the city. Lastly, transportation. There wasn't enough talked about transportation in the memorandum of understanding. I've walked down 136 with my girlfriends walking in the morning many years ago when I could. And it not only is a danger to walkers, but it's a danger to cars. It's not adequate for the vehicles that are traveling on it now. I've heard that from many residents of the neighborhood. But there's no indication of how much improvement they're going to do to the streets surrounding this property. When Risden Middle School was built, the city insisted that the entire width of Newcastle Way be improved by the school. Curb, gutter, and sidewalk, both sides. You know how I feel about the safety of walkers. You know about what it's like to walk at night in the dark. I didn't see any street lights in any of those renderings. I didn't see a landscape strip between the sidewalk and the streets. And there's no sidewalk on one side of the street within the neighborhood. There's lot to lot, street to street. I will finish up. Street to street lots requiring variance from through lot conditions of our zoning code. And there are many other hidden things that haven't been revealed that's going to need to be addressed about this project. Please ask for that information and defer final approval till you have that.
Thank you. Russ Signer.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm a resident of Newcastle since 2001. My first meeting with anybody from Newcastle was stumbling into Milt Swanson. And he was my introduction. And right after that, I met Pam and Gary Lee with the Historical Society. I'm here as the president of the Historical Society and have worked with Pam Lee and Gary over the years that they tried to figure out what was eventually going to happen to the property. Finding a developer who's capable of dealing with such a site and doing it in a credible manner is very rare. So you have an opportunity to work with people who have the capacity, the understanding, the vision to do something that's really correct. And I urge you to support this application and move it forward. There are a lot of questions that will be brought forward for us. We're a very small group in the Newcastle Historical Society, but we've done our best as volunteers to work with the city and the cemetery, Newcastle Days, the signs around the city, and so on. I'm convinced that once this is established, it will become a focus for fundraising and for the interest of other volunteers in the region. I'm quite familiar with volunteerism, working at Snoqualmie, at the museum there, and museums around the country. Lots of people, we don't know who they are, will be very much interested in helping us. All we have to do is get the project started and then stick with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Bima.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, my father was probably one of the founding members of the Historical Society, and I'm involved in the Historical Society here today. My domicile is in Bellevue, but my heart is in Newcastle, where I grew up. I sometimes refer to myself as the last man standing. I'm the second generation American-born Italian immigrant, and I was not born when my grandfather worked in the coal mines here at Newcastle, but watched his firstborn son, Joseph, work in the mines. Together with Mike Rubatino, another Italian immigrant, they continued mining here in Newcastle under the name of the B&R Coal Company. My father, too, worked for his brother underground until the lease expired and the mines closed in the early 60s. My father was born here in Company House number 75, that we now refer to as the Bima House. I spent many hours in the house with my uncle Buff, Adolph Bima, around the coal workings. I grew up in the home where these historic structures are going to be moved to. Imagine for a moment a young man hand digging the well to provide water for his family, his young wife, my mother, standing overhead with a rope lifting the bucket of the dirt out with the rope. Ask yourself today if you're up to that task, at the bottom of the pit or standing overhead pulling on the rope. Company House 75 had no indoor toilet until my father plumbed and outfitted the bathroom in that very room where he was born. My father's years were waning. I asked him a simple question as what he thought about all the surrounding development and the transformation of the land, which he remembered. He simply said, with a shrug of his shoulders, I guess it's progress. Although he said this, I'm certain that he didn't really believe it. No, there are certain things in our lives that we can't go backwards and redo. Things like the Newcastle Schoolhouse that was raised, Uniontown Market, where the intersection of Southeast 91st is at now on Coal Creek Parkway. The fishing right-of-way. Now, even the old swimming hole, all just memories. That's one of the reasons we have the museum like the Museum of History and Industry in Seattle, the MOHI. We cherish and celebrate the artifacts that built Seattle. Newcastle and the mining industry also helped make Seattle what it is today. It needs to be preserved and celebrated as well. Done properly, it could be profitable and self-sustaining. The city of Newcastle is willing to partner with the artifacts, has a willing partner to see that these artifacts are preserved for the benefit of everyone, sharing interest in the coal mining and local history. I endorse the project reluctantly, not because I think it's bad for the community or the economy, but because it represents a change from the Newcastle and the home that I remember as a child.
We need you to wrap up, please.
All right. Pam and Gary Lee have done a marvelous job in preserving this site and the property. And I think the city of Newcastle continue on and preserve this for all future visitors and residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have completed the list. I thought I called you. I'm so sorry, Mr. Troutman. I apologize. I thought I called you. I apologize. Go ahead, please. I think I prematurely put a check mark by the name.
I can understand that. Good evening, Len Troutman. I've lived in Newcastle here since 1985. You guys all know me. I was handed looks like something I would write. As I came in and asked if I would read it, a third party actually handed it to me. And so this is testimony for the public hearing on behalf of Brad Corner, who's also a Newcastle resident. I think if he'd heard some of the points that the developer made, it answered some of his concerns. And in the interest of time, I'm going to kind of summarize and probably jump to the end. He was concerned that he thinks that only the mayor, of all the members on the council, only the mayor signed the original memorandum of understanding. And the gist of it is that he's recommending to not rush into signing this right away until certain other things have been considered. And he says, I hereby recommend canceling tonight's presentation. I think he means the vote to approve until, number one, the council members have signed the memorandum of understanding. Two, all environmental concerns of both the council and the public are presented in a public hearing as proof to both the allowability and any significance beyond normal administrative departures. 2 acres out of 7.5 acres is a significant area in the state's rating system of wetlands. 3, specific tasks of some sort of improvements required by the developer and/or the city and their respective cost estimates that are then presented to the public and the city council. Without more and better information, both the public and the city council are being subjected to omissions of material facts before being asked to make a decision in voting the proposal with the development agreement. And if I understand things correctly, you guys have a copy of this as well, so.
Yes, we do, sir.
You can go through that as well, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, now I've run out of a list of folks on here. Just double checking any further. Any virtuals?
No, would you want to ask specifically if there's any virtual comments?
Of course. I'd like to ask the virtual audience if anybody on the call tonight is interested in speaking, giving public testimony regarding the Lee Property Development Agreement. Please raise your hand if you are. I see no hands, so, okay, moving on to council discussion. And then I'll close the public hearing and then I'll take motions. Any further discussion? Councilmember Clark, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Nguyen. So thank you, everybody who presented tonight and who spoke in public comment. If this project was right next to a well-developed, sustainable road, I'd be all for it, right? Because everything looks great to me, right? The historical part of it is very appealing, right? I love the fact that we could put all our historical stuff in one spot, right? It shouldn't be in a closet in the annex and so on. My concern is regarding the connectivity to this project. So under the development agreement, it's in our municipal code. It says, section 1709-120C, the proposed development agreement will result in a development that adequately mitigates impacts to public facilities, including utilities, roads, public transportation, parks, recreation, schools. So in the package that we were given tonight to look at, this was in there with the staff response. And the response is, and I won't read the whole thing, but basically it says, other types of mitigation will be addressed when the site plan, surface water engineering, critical area review, and traffic analysis are completed. But then they go on to say this criterion is met. So that's a contradiction where we're saying that, the staff at least is saying that we understand that this development should adequately meet all these things. We haven't studied it yet, but we agree that that's met. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And commenter Carol Simpson kind of took the words out of my mouth. I don't have enough information here about the impact to the roads, one specifically 136. And I'm concerned if I go to the, to the memorandum of understanding, section 8D, and I won't read the whole thing, but basically it says the lease payment of costs associated with development of the property are including but not limited to, and then it goes on, all improvements associated with both internal streets and the abutting streets right of way. So what does that mean? Right? To me, that means that the abutting street is 136th Avenue down to Golf Course Road. And that is one of the worst roads in our city right now. It's got a pavement condition index of 32. And talking with our public works director, he expects that number to go down in the next survey. And just for a reference, the PCI goal of our city is 76. So even if we made some adjustments down to 60 or something, that's significantly poor street. It's almost a rural road. A lot of the public comments that we received wasn't really addressed by the presenters tonight, but my gist on the take of public comments was the condition of the road, right? Accidents on the road is narrow, it's humped, it's dark, it's in poor condition. And none of that has been addressed tonight, and that's a significant cost to the city. So if I go back to the municipal code, there's a section 12.05.030, and it says this: any land development which will impact the service level, safety, or operational efficiency of serving roads or is required by other city code or ordinance to improve such roads shall improve those roads in accordance with these standards. So that's very clear to me. The developer shall improve the roads. It's not may or might, or maybe we'd like you to do that. It shall. So maybe other people will read that differently, but to me, that's pretty clear cut. So if you combine that code with the memorandum of understanding, talking about how the cost will be, it kind of backs up what I just read in the code, where the developer will take care of the cost with abutting streets right of way, and I guess we could debate what that is, but to me, that's the whole 136, because that's where the traffic is gonna go, right? That road now is not the main thoroughfare for China, you know, for all the other developments in the area, but it's gonna be the main thoroughfare for this group of people. And that road goes down to Newcastle Way at a blind corner. Okay, so that is also a concern. Councilmember Lacotia attempted to bring that up, but that is associated right of way to me. So I don't have any answer. Haven't heard any answers about what's going to happen with that road and how that's going to be paid for. There was a comment early in the presentation that this road is on our capital improvement list, and that is true. However, it's not on the capital improvement list for the next 6 years. So we just, earlier this year, we had a public hearing on the capital improvement plan, transportation plan, and it was vetted by Director Bronze, and it was a public comment, and we all had a chance to talk about it. And there's an 6-year plan going out to 2028, and that project is not on here. So what that means is that the city and all of us have not said that that is so important that we need to move that up. So we have prioritized all our transportation projects already. So if we put that forward, which we will have to do if this traffic starts going down this road, what other priority do we kick off that serves more people in the community? This is serving 37 homes. So I have a lot of questions, right, that are not answered. So I'm not comfortable giving a vote tonight. I like this development. As a standalone development, I'm all for it, right? But the questions about connectivity, which are part of the MOU and part of our code, have not been answered to me. So my concern is if we approve this development agreement tonight and we vote for it and it passes, so there was a presentation that said, well, this is only the first step in public hearing. We all know that once the ball starts rolling, we're not going to stop it, right? Let's be realistic, right? There's going to be other public hearings and all that, but we're rolling down the hill. It's not going to stop. And there's a note in here that there will be a transportation a study of transportation impact on the, right? The developer's not going to hire somebody who's going to give them a bad traffic analysis, so that's going to pass. And we're going to hear that this road is just fine and we should just take it. So this is just me, I'm not comfortable voting for this agreement tonight based on all these unanswered questions. So if the developers or somebody would like to come back and give me some assurance tonight, but I don't think that's going to be possible because I already heard that we haven't studied these things yet. Those should all be in front of us because the memorandum of understanding, as Speaker Simpson said, addresses these things and we haven't heard about them. So I know I've spoken a long time, but I would vote for this project if it was abutting a golf course road directly. But I'm not satisfied with the connectivity to this area. So I'm not in favor of this tonight. I'm sorry.
Any further discussion? Councilmember Lacotia.
So I would just, give my perspective on a few things. The few features that was missing from the development agreement, again, as one of our public comments said, that yes, a lot of information is missing. I would like to see more information around this. And the features that are missing from the development agreement, again, requiring the roadway improvements and coming back to those two corners, that should be part of the development agreement, whether those two corners require a roundabout, because city doesn't have the capacity to bear costs for those improvements. We are already sitting on a big hole of deficit in our budget, and we don't want to, fall prey for this after the development is done, and then, there is public safety issues, and then the city has to spend millions of dollars trying to, make improvements into these things. So I would like to see those things in the development agreement. How will you ensure, traffic safety in this area? And yeah, I would like to see more information. And till we see more information regarding this, I think we should wait on it. That's my personal opinion.
Councilmember Griffin.
Thank you, Mayor Newing. In the presenter, he said that when I asked about the soil underneath, he said if we could vote for the DA tonight, and then the staff could look into it later. I think that that's kind of getting the cart before the horse, because I think that we ought to have these things cleared up before we approve it and try to move forward.
Anyone else? Councilmember Villasenor.
Yeah. First of all, I think my colleagues, when referring to a deficit for our operating budget, are conflating that with capital, which is a spot where we are relatively healthy as a city. So I think that there's some confusion there. I do want to thank the Historical Society for coming out tonight and giving us their perspectives. And I think there is a lot of other process left to go. I think if we're talking about putting the cart before the horse, there's much more process out in front of us. This is a vote for the developer agreement. So that's my comment.
You already spoke, so just a moment. Councilmember Charbonneau.
Thank you. Yeah, I would, of course, echo appreciating people coming out as well. The thing that, at least I'm being struck by here, is I think that there is what the developer and what our own staff are working with are guiding documents that the council has put forth and then come back to us with a proposal, right? So that is the comprehensive plan, that is the PUD, that is public work standards, it is a few different things. So I mean, I think we can sit here and individually look at specific items that we as council members might not like, and have full discretion to, put on the record things we would like, how I feel about bike lanes. I'm just throwing it out there again. But those are the guiding documents they're presented with, and there are other, having it being built in 2024, there are other means to continue to have that public input. I think there are great means to continue to push for some of those items and continue to, have that conversation, especially with a comp plan update coming, especially with a lot of these different items. I don't think it's to the boon of anyone in this room to kick the can down the road, and especially when we talked about the urgency of preserving our history, which is a lot of it's not here anymore. When we talk about the urgency of providing more housing, I don't think that benefits the folks here. I think we can have these conversations about what we want to see, and I would love to have those conversations about what we want to see with our comp plan, what we want to see with our public work standards, if you're not happy with it currently. But I don't think it should be punitive to the folks that put the hard work into this project if you're not happy with those specific documents.
Deputy Mayor Sherlock.
Thank you. Yeah, first I want to thank everybody who presented and spoke tonight. There's a lot of really interesting information, and I do think that someone mentioned the MOU being a very high-level part of this process, and I feel like that this is actually also a very high-level part of this process. And the next part is digging into those details, and we will have public hearings and on that process, and it's an extensive process to go through, and that's where we talk about the studies and all that stuff. And if those standards aren't met, it doesn't move forward. So I'm in favor of moving forward. I think this at a high level is worth moving forward with. There's been a lot of really great effort put into it already, and I'm in favor of going to the next step.
Okay, any further comments? All right, I will close the public hearing. I'm looking for a motion. Deputy Mayor Sherlock.
I move to adopt Resolution 2022-920, approving the Lee Property Development Agreement pursuant to Chapter 17.09 of the Newcastle Municipal Code as presented in Exhibit 1.
Okay, it's been moved by Deputy Mayor Sherlock, seconded by Councilmember Charbonneau to, hold on here, I'm looking for my motion. Shut it up. Okay. To adopt Resolution 2022-920, approving the Lee Property Development Agreement pursuant to Chapter 17.09 of the Newcastle Municipal Code as presented in Exhibit 1. Deputy Mayor Sherlock, would you like to speak to your motion, please?
I think my last comment spoke to it.
Councilmember Charbonneau, anything to add?
No further comment.
Thank you. Councilmember Clark,
Thank you, Mayor Newing. I'd like to make an amendment to the motion, please.
do you have that to hand down to me?
I do not, I'm sorry, but it's pretty simple. I would like to amend the motion to delay this process at least 1 month until we have more adequate information on the details of the MOU.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Clark, seconded by Councilmember Lakotia to delay the process at least 1 month pending additional information on the MOU. Councilmember Clark, would you like to speak to your amendment?
Thank you, Mayor Newing. I kind of said my piece already. There are parts of the MOU that have not been addressed in this development agreement, and that was what the development agreement was supposed to do. There's no cart and horse thing here. There are specific things in the development agreement that have not been addressed. So we need to know what those are. And one of them I mentioned, who's going to pay for the internal and external street improvements, and we don't know. And once this ball gets rolling, we're not going to stop it. Let's be realistic about that.
Councilmember Lakotia, anything to add?
No.
Okay, the amendment on the floor for consideration is to delay the process of approving the Lee Property Development Agreement at least 1 month pending further information on the MOU. All in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion or amendment fails 3-4 with council members Griffin, Lakotia, and Clark voting in the affirmative. Back to the main motion. To adopt Resolution 2022-920, approving the Lee Property Development Agreement pursuant to Chapter 17.09 of the Newcastle Municipal Code as presented in Exhibit 1. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Motion carries 4-3. Council members Clark, Lakotia, and Griffin dissenting. All right. Nice job, everyone. Thank you to all who spoke. And very impressed with our youth speaker tonight. I appreciate you being here. Okay, moving on to general business. Item 11.1 is adoption of ordinance 2022-650, amending the allowed uses of real estate excise tax proceeds. Is that Mr. Palmer?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before you is an ordinance 2022-650 that amends the municipal code. This is in light of the street fund because it's dependent upon operating transfers. Historically, the general fund has always been supporting the street fund. And during the budget process, we came up with a new process, new part of the statute that allows REIT revenue to be used for, it'll be a sunset at the end of the next year. That allows that, but our city code did not. So that's the preface of this whole thing, is to allow that, which has already been adopted by the city council in the budget process.
Thank you. Any questions for Director Palmer? Anything to add, City Manager Pingle? Okay. Questions? Is there a motion?
I move adoption of ordinance 2022-650, amending sections 3.20.1010 and 3.20.020 as of the Newcastle Municipal Code relating to the uses of real estate excise tax proceeds as presented.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Villasenor, seconded by Deputy Mayor Sherlock, to adopt ordinance 2022-650, amending sections 3.20.010 and 3.20.020 of the Newcastle Municipal Code relating to the uses of real estate excise tax proceeds as presented. Councilmember Villasenor, would you like to speak to your motion?
No comments.
Deputy Mayor Sherlock, anything to add? No. Okay, motion on the floor. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Okay, moving on to item 11.2, adoption of ordinance 2022-651, amending Exhibit A to ordinance 2022-649, the 2023 salary schedule. City Manager Pingle, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. So the proposal before the council is to amend the 2023 salary schedule, adding a deputy finance director and defunding the accounting analyst position. Our finance director has indicated his intentions to retire in the next 12 to 18 months. And so in anticipation of that, and in anticipation of the process we'll need to go through in order to recruit someone, making this change gives us an opportunity to both go find our new finance director and have them come into the organization and help as everyone in the department currently is training and being trained. And so there's a lot of transition going on. And so bringing somebody in early in that process will be super helpful. It also is a move we can make that is budget neutral, just because we'll have to go through a recruitment process to find the right person. As far as I'm concerned, and working with Director Palmer, going to find the city's new finance director is no small task. And so if we can do it in a budget neutral way, because we'll have some savings from not paying for that position for a couple of months as we recruit, it would be great to have that option.
Thank you. Any questions for City Manager Pingle on this topic? Any motions? Councilmember Charbonneau, go ahead, please.
I move adoption of ordinance 2022-651, amending Exhibit A to ordinance 2022-649, the 2023 salary schedule to add a deputy finance director position and defund the accounting analyst position as presented.
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Charbonneau, seconded by Councilmember Villasenor, to adopt ordinance 2022-651, amending Exhibit A to ordinance 2022-649, the 2023 salary schedule, to add a deputy finance director position and defund the accounting analyst position as presented. Councilmember Charbonneau, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah, very briefly. I think this was unanimously recommended to council by the Salary and Benefits Commission. I think this is a really ideal situation for us. You know, we'd had a lot of turnover for a lot of different positions. We're getting, Finance Director Palmer is giving us a lot of advance notice. We have the opportunity to bring in someone to work with him and learn from him for a period of time before transitioning into a director role. And I think it's just a really ideal situation all around. I appreciate the staff working to put it together and help us remain budget neutral with this sort of approach.
Councilmember Villasenor, anything to add?
Just that I appreciate this step in being proactive about succession planning, and hopefully we'll be able to send Director Palmer to retirement with someone perfectly suited to our needs.
I don't know, he's smiling too much over there. The Cheshire Cat. Any further comments? Councilmember Lacotia.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, never heard that you would need, if somebody needs a 12 to 18 months of training, definitely that person is not worth hiring. As city manager said that it's a difficult job. We need to find the right person. What if you do not find the right person? What if you hired somebody and that person is not the right person? When we hired the city manager was a difficult job. But then we did not hire somebody in advance 6 to 8 months so that that person could be trained into the job. In my corporate career, I've never been in a job where I was given a guarantee of a promotion. What if the person is not up to mark? What if you realize that after a few months that no, this person cannot take this job? We are sitting on a big hole with a budget deficit. Here we are trying to, some of us worked really hard to come up with ideas how to reduce that deficit. The senior accountant position has been now upgraded to an assistant director where we have doubled our expenses. We are looking for ways to reduce our expenses, but no. I have a proposal in front of me which doubles the expenses. Is this needed now? Do we need an assistant director now? Is it impacting public safety? Is it impacting parks, trails, infrastructure? Does this position impact any of that? Because I know I always hear that, oh, we need taxes, we need more money because you know what, we are running short of public safety expenses, those things are becoming more expensive. So for me, this position is pure luxury and a splurge. And I am, personally, I'm pretty disappointed with this whole idea of hiring somebody 12 to 18 months in advance, or even if you guys want to hire, even if it takes like 6 months to hire, training somebody for 12 to 18 months and having that double expense to the city, it's totally unnecessary in my personal opinion.
City Manager Pingle, not to put you on the spot, but just wanted to see if you have anything to add to that.
I don't think succession planning is anything that's new or that is uncommon, whether it's in the private sector or in the public sector. The time frame is simply because that's the time frame that we were given by our outgoing finance director. And again, it's something that we can do in a budget neutral way.
And I do want to add that I see this isn't really an overfill of a position for training purposes, but I do see that type of thing happening in municipal government primarily, and probably in other settings as well. But we are not creating an additional expense by hiring this individual, this position, because we are holding open a senior accountant position. That means we're not paying both of them. And finance directors these days are pretty difficult to find. They're few and far between, and many finance director positions are open for a number of months. We're a small city, we're a small staff, we do an annual budget. If Director Palmer chose to retire even in winter, and we went out and tried to find a finance director to bring that individual on board, get him or her up to speed on the Newcastle practices, etc., it would significantly delay our budget process and put additional burden on all of the staff and the council to try to approve a budget. So this is really not unheard of. I find it very acceptable. Councilmember Clark, you raised your hand right as I was speaking. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mayor Newing. So I was in the salary committee when we approved this, and I actually made the motion to approve this. I've had time to think about it, actually, and I would be more comfortable, honestly, knowing a specific date. So if the finance director, Mr. Palmer, said, hey, I'm leaving on this date, and we got closer to that date before we pulled the trigger on this, I'd be feeling more comfortable about that. It's just too much of a nebulous time of like, how long will this be? So I'm actually had a changeable heart on this. Thank you.
Councilmember Griffin?
Well, if we hired somebody right now, we'd probably lose the adversity of having, getting someone that kind of has their own ideas about how to run things instead of the same way we've been. We'd have the same problem if, let's say, that Director Palmer got hit by a car and he wasn't able to come back to work. We would have to dig out there really quick and find somebody to replace him. So, I think that having a long, extended term ahead of his leaving doesn't really make sense because we're paying two people to do the same job.
Okay, motion? Oh. Is there a motion? Councilmember Villasenor? Did you? I apologize. Long comments drag on. All right, the motion on the floor was made by Councilmember Charbonneau, seconded by Councilmember Villasenor, to adopt ordinance 2022-651, amending Exhibit A to ordinance 2022-649, the 2023 salary schedule to add a deputy finance director position and defund the accounting analyst position as presented. I probably am in need of a holiday break, so again, all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Motion carries 4-3. Council members Clark, Lacotia, and Griffin dissenting. All right. Now, moving on to our last item on the general business. Adoption of Resolution 2022-921. Select consultant and direct staff to negotiate contract for comprehensive plan periodic update. Director Hoffman, it seems to be your night.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is not our new topic. The agenda item is, because it's the next step that leads to a 2-year process, but you should be at this point well versed that there's a Growth Management Act in the state of Washington with mandates. One of those is by December 2024, cities and counties planning under the Growth Management Act shall look at their policies and development regulations and update them for a variety of reasons, primarily to be consistent with changes in the legislature, but also regional transportation, regional economic strategies, and so forth, and the King County countywide planning policies, as well as local changes and needs. So it's a broad relook, not intended to be frequent. In this case, it's 8 years. After this round, it'll go to 10 years. So it's broad, it's comprehensive, it's time consuming. I ran out of adjectives in the staff report to explain the burden. The main point being that it's a large scale policy and development code relook with a lot of uncertainty as to the individual steps. It's meant to be inclusive. It's meant to follow comments, leads, and needs, and explore the long-term vision, the mission, the objectives and goals of the city. Keep what is relevant, revise what isn't, and add innovative new methods if they apply to the city of Newcastle. A lot of cities have started this, especially the big cities, and it's a long process. When I came on in September, one of the first tasks was what is in place already? When could this be done? What manpower or staffing do we have available? What resources could be brought to bear? Fortunately, we went right into budget. So that was very informative. So with this 2-year process coming and a very small staff, and honoring a request for proposals that was put out by the prior director earlier this year, there were 2 applications. We invited them to present to staff to form a recommendation to the city council. We were fortunate that both of them are highly skilled, very different, but highly skilled, and would be great for this effort. But they are different. One is based in the state of Washington, one isn't, but has extensive national experience in a lot of states. But I'll leave it with that for the reasons stated in the agenda bill a recommendation is being made to go with SCJ Alliance. One of those variables is staffing and budget. Staff has applied for and received grant funding to do this effort through the state. They recognize by placing these growth management act burdens on cities and counties, some cities are not well placed to fund these efforts, even though they're very big efforts. So that grant funding was approved 2 years ago and then a year ago, and it's in place. One of the items on your consent calendar tonight was specific to the periodic update, acceptance of the first year of a 2-year grant totaling $125,000. Previous work by staff that you'd be aware of is a middle housing grant that takes a separate scope of work and a separate timeline, but very consistent with what needs to be done for this comprehensive plan periodic update. That looks at the housing element and related policies and development regulations specifically, and filters it through a lens of middle housing, duplex, triplex, quadruplex. The grant was applied for and received, and it was actually increased. Right now, the contract that we have just signed with Commerce is for $85,000 for that portion. It gets sidetracked. It also includes $20,000 for contracting with Arch, who we are a member with, for a community-based organization to look at displacement, and we're approaching that as a partnership. I bring up these other 2 grant programs because the deliverables or output of those grants, once satisfied with Commerce, can also be used specifically for our comprehensive plan update. So I'm trying not to mix the 2 scopes or the understanding of what those efforts are, but I'm trying to relay a story that we're trying to achieve grant funding that would pay for this small city's periodic update, which is time-consuming and expensive. It could be a $200,000 effort in total once you factor in all the steps, public outreach, code development. I will mention that the scope of work for the missing middle includes development of draft ordinances looking at middle housing. There's no obligation for a city or county to adopt them, but we must look at them. The portion prior to that is the existing policies, potential new policies. We intend very much to use that in the housing element update. The recommendation tonight is for the consultant to be selected based on the RFP, but also authorize city manager and staff to negotiate a contract for the periodic update of the comprehensive plan. The 2 scopes and grants are with Commerce. This contract could be envisioned as a singular contract with a consultant, subcontracted through the city, that fulfills all 2 of the 3 grants. The third one would stay with Arch under a separate contract. So that's the background for the funding and the intent. I wish I had an exact dollar amount of how much the periodic update will cost. We have a great idea. We know what we're faced with. We have a timeline. By January, we're hoping to have a consultant on board, utilizing 3 resources. These grant funds, professional services already in the approved budget to whatever extent they may be needed for specific technical expertise, but also existing salaries. This is not bring a consultant into the city, sign a contract, please go develop a comprehensive plan and hand it to us. This is very much an interactive existing staff effort, but we need the assistance of a consultant that's highly specialized and has the time to do a very good job on this. We feel that this candidate is that group that we would like to work with. We're making that recommendation tonight for selection, and we're open for any questions you might have.
All right, any questions for Director Hoffman? Any motions? Go ahead, Councilmember Villasenor.
Sure. I move adoption of Resolution 2022-921, selecting SCJ Alliance as consultant to assist with the required 2024 periodic update of the comprehensive plan as presented.
Is there a second? All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Villaseñor, seconded by Councilmember Clark, to adopt Resolution 2022-921, selecting SCJ Alliance as consultant to assist with the required 2024 periodic update of the comprehensive plan. As presented, Councilmember Villaseñor, would you like to speak to your motion?
No, thank you.
Councilmember Clark, anything to add?
No comments.
All right, all in favor of the motion to adopt Resolution 2022-921, selecting SCJ Alliance as consultant to assist with the required 2024 periodic update of the comprehensive plan as presented, please say aye. 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 Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Okay, moving on. Additional public comment. Any members of the in-person audience would like to speak? Come. Carol Simpson, go ahead. Again, 3 minutes.
Carol Simpson, Olympus neighborhood. I'm your personal AWC trainer. First of all, you need to remember you swore to uphold the Constitution of the United States. And part of that is it's not your job to preach to us from a city facility. There's a separation of church and state. Don't do that. I'm offended. Second, my father at age 15 and his little sister who was 11 left Hawaii on a ship bound for the United States on December 1942. And he was told by the captain of that ship, everybody was told by the captain of that ship, you will not tell anybody when you get home what you saw in Pearl Harbor. The ship left from the back of the harbor and went through the entire harbor before they went home. They didn't know where they were going. Nobody knew when they were arriving. A 15-year-old and 11-year-old. Don't tell me about Pearl Harbor. Get smart. Study up, do a better job. If you're going to talk about a business, check your facts. You're an educated, elected officials. You're supposed to be smarter than the common Joe. Call Verdi. Ask them, why are you hiring? Don't spread rumor and innuendo. They must be doing really well if they're hiring. Hey, maybe they just lost 3 of our key staff and they're struggling. Maybe that's happening. Lastly, you don't know what it's like to go through several months of not having a finance director and doing a budget. I think the person who stepped in and filled that hole when our previous finance director left before Don Palmer came on staff, the previous person is no longer with the city. So Mr. Palmer is taking extra special care that you have a trained person to step in when he retires. I admire this plan. This is to the best of the city. It was hell to try and pass a budget without a finance director. The person who stepped in was working 7 days a week. She was in the city morning, noon, and night. The staff was overstressed. Scott and Don are doing a great job to make sure you don't have to deal with that. So learn your jobs. Talk to your people. Your business, existing businesses are businesses you want to support. You don't want them to leave. It's harder to fill empty spaces. There's empty spaces. Guess what? There weren't empty spaces during the big recession. Why are there empty spaces now? What are you doing to help the economic development of the city to raise sales taxes, to offset our property taxes? Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Virtually?
Yes, there is, Madam Mayor.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Am I on?
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Okay. I am Tamara Kameen from Olympus Neighborhood, and I tried my darndest to get on and get my public comment at the beginning of the meeting. The Zoom was not working. I could not raise my hand until Council Member Charbonneau was giving his public comments. So I am here to now speak about the 11.2 changing from the hiring an accountant to hiring a assistant finance director. I am very opposed to this, and luckily, it can still be, the motion can still be reconsidered, so I'm going to give you my comment on it. The first one is when a finance director leaves any organization, that is an opportunity to bring on new perspectives and new ideas and not necessarily go in the same direction. In our city right now, given the conditions of spending and revenue for general fund, we need somebody with new ideas and new focus that is familiar with effective cost spending, listening to our citizens in terms of matching spending and revenue. And perhaps we could even get someone from the private sector who is very familiar with this. So that's one thing we should look for in a new finance director. Secondly, we need to look for people who can think outside of the box, not just think about how we've always done things. We don't want to just do things the same way. As you know, and as you just passed a change in our rules, we're using about 300,000, I believe, of REIT money to help our general fund. That outside of the box idea came from a city council member, Member Griffin, and he's not even on the finance committee, and it did not come from the finance director. We need out of the box thinking in a new finance director. We can also find one who's more familiar with software, whether it's ClearGov or something else that can use the automated software to help us. I believe this won't be successful if we're going to try to use 12 to 18 months of 4 high-level people working on finance, we are going to overspend. It will not be budget neutral. The mayor misspoke when she said we're not going to hire a senior accountant. We already promoted a senior accountant. We're not going to hire a regular accounting analyst. So it will not be revenue neutral. And we have no guarantees that whoever we hire will want to stay through our current finance director's duration. There's no guarantees. We already will be training our senior accountant, who is new in the position, on the accounting and budgeting that we would be training a finance assistant on. I believe it's very bad business to look at an extended training period. And I think this is not a good strategy. We should reconsider the motion. We should go back to just hiring the other person. Otherwise, we're going to be running our financial director. We're going to be running our finances.
Wrap up, please.
Two high-level people, the finance director, an assistant director, a senior accountant, and a tech. That is very much overspending and too high a level for running one department. So I believe you should reconsider this. That could be done at this meeting or in January. Thank you.
Anyone else virtually? Okay. All right, moving on. Planning calendars. City Manager Pingle, it's all you.
Just a couple of things to be aware of for January. At the January 3rd meeting, we have planned to start at 6 with a joint meeting with the Planning Commission, going through their work plan. And then similarly at the January 17th meeting, starting at 6 to go through with the CAC. And then just as far as general business for the January 3rd meeting, we plan on having a presentation and work program from Arch. And that's about the highlights.
Okay, any questions for City Manager Pingle? All right. This meeting is adjourned.